Welcome to another installment of Deconstructing Babylon. I'm the Discerning Clerk, an elder millennial, a zennial, if you will. I came up in the 90s, which was arguably a fire decade, cinematically speaking. I'm also a born-again believer in Jesus, being transformed by his Spirit. That transformation means growing in the gifts of the Spirit, including discernment. The biblical framework I use is his inspired and revealed word, which is the source of truth and is living and active. I pray you find this discussion helpful as you grow in discernment, so you too are not deceived by the signs and symbols shown to you through the mystery religion of Hollywood Babylon. Today we'll be deconstructing the lighthearted, divorce-centered, cross-dressing comedy, Mrs Doubtfire. The absolutely iconic performance from the late Robin Williams, the talented child actors, the hilarious yet heartwarming script, all combined to one of the most loved movies to come out of the 90s. And yet, I once worked with a guy at the video store who was the only person I had ever met who didn't like this movie. His parents had gone through a divorce that same year, and his teenage self and his newly single mother couldn't even make it through one viewing at the theater. It's this kind of truth that they put in movies, the failure of the family veiled behind comedic fiction. The Video Movie Guide gives it a whopping 4 stars. Robin Williams is a howl as a father so desperate to be near his kids after separating from his wife that he masquerades as their elderly Irish nanny. Sally Field proves to be a terrific straight man for her co-star, while the film smartly avoids the pitfalls found in the similarly themed All I Want for Christmas. First of all, what the heck? She's clearly English. She says she's from England. Definitely not Irish. Secondly, what pitfalls are you talking about with an obscure Christmas movie? Came out in 1991 and stars the talented Thora Birch as a girl who naively asks Santa Claus for her divorced parents to reunite. And they do. The synopsis in this very book warned children of divorce against watching this movie lest they believe the premise. I guess writers presume the plot of Mrs Doubtfire is less believable than Santa Claus being real. Anyway, let's deconstruct the signs, symbols, and storylines within. At first, we are lulled into family movie submission with animation, specifically the main character, Daniel Hillard, at his job as a voiceover actor. Nice work if you can get it. And Daniel is multi-talented. I have my personal qualms with animated content, especially when it's aimed at children. I know that seems weird because we consider all cartoons to be meant for children, but more often than not, the themes discussed and presented are for indoctrination on adult topics and are more readily accepted in this format. Warner Brothers, Looney Tunes, Disney, Nickelodeon, they all do it.
How about a nice, soothing cigarette?
So Daniel here is represented as a man who stands on his principles and walks away from his job by taking the moral high ground. But because he leaves work early, he makes it in time to pick up his 3 children from school.
I thought you couldn't pick us up.
Well, I got off early.
You mean you got fired?
No, I quit. For reasons of conscience.
The opening credits are still rolling, and Daniel is now established as an erratic, untrustworthy man who tells his children to keep secrets from their own mother.
Yes.
No parties. Mom said you couldn't have one because of your report card.
Mom's not gonna be home for another 4 hours.
He throws his only son a lavish, probably expensive birthday party, complete with balloons, petting zoo, and what, every kid in the school? Honestly, when did he plan all of this? Was he always planning to leave work early so he could surprise his son and deceive his wife?
Miranda Hillard, please.
Miranda is Daniel's wife, a partner at an interior design firm. Oh my goodness, that was the dream job for the 90s corporate girlies. So here's Miranda living the dream, which is swiftly interrupted by a neighbor at home.
We're also responding to a noise ordinance violation.
Believe me, I'm going to respond myself. I'm awfully...
The way this scene hits different when you're a mom and not a child anymore is absolutely wild. I wouldn't even leave my child as a guest at this unsupervised party. Separately, this song by House of Pain was a massive point of contention in my house growing up with a police officer father. If you know, you know. So did the cop talk to Daniel? And didn't he knock on the door and shut down the noise? Didn't he ticket the mobile petting zoo for not having a proper permit? No, he waited for Miranda to come home.
You're home early, girlfriend.
So the jig is up for Daniel, and He really thinks it's okay to lie to his wife and tell his children to do the same and then manipulate her when he's caught.
Just realize you're spending too much time with those corporate clones you used to despise.
Interesting. How this narrative of the working mom, which started in the 80s and made women believe they could have it all, but it is a lie, clearly. She doesn't even want to consider counseling or mediation. It's straight to court.
Well, it looks like there is a little light at the end of our tunnel, eh?
Daniel moves permanently out of his home and away from his children, Lydia, Chris, and Matilda. Natalie. The judge's orders are for Daniel to get a steady job and an acceptable place to live before he can even be considered to have shared custody.
And I will be coming by on Monday and Friday evenings to inspect it.
Meanwhile, Miranda carries on as if she isn't going through a divorce. And we meet Stu Dunmeyer, the stud from her past who desires to be a part of her future.
Well, ancient history.
In a divorce where children are involved, we typically see them assign blame in order to cope. Chris, the middle child, has already blamed himself for having had a birthday. Lydia, the oldest daughter, blames her mother. And Natalie, the youngest, rightly holds her father responsible.
Can't you just tell Mom you're sorry?
The Act 2 turn happens when Daniel sabotages Miranda's efforts to get help with the house and children. And he plots to get the position in his favorite way, by manipulation and deception.
Going for the kill.
He enlists the help of his flamboyant brother, Frank, who just so happens to make prosthetics for film, and together they come up with a character.
Euphigenia Doubtfire.
Hilarity ensues when the social worker shows up at Daniel's apartment for the scheduled inspection, and she encounters Mrs. Doubtfire.
Hello!
We are then shown the lengths he goes to in order to transform into the British nanny, including full face mask, wig, teeth, and bodysuit. He tells the social worker that he is working 2 jobs, one as a clerk at a TV studio and the other cleaning houses. But this is just more deception and manipulation. It's not the full truth. As the nanny, he is with his children in physical presence, but he can't be himself, obviously.
I miss Dad.
Me too.
Me most.
I'm here, guys.
It's funny because Mrs. Doubtfire is hard on the kids, not permissive like Daniel is. And with Miranda, he's trying to please her, but Daniel isn't trying to win her back.
You're making my mom so happy.
He must carry on the ruse for 90 days until they return to court. And everything is going very well. The children are thriving under the focused attention of Mrs. Doubtfire. And Daniel is even self-improving and learning new skills as a housewife. And Miranda? Well, Miranda is letting sparks fly with Stu, even introducing him to her children.
Stew. That's more of a thick soup than a name, really.
So Stu immediately senses something is off with Mrs. Doubtfire, and Daniel doesn't hide his contempt for the charming suitor. We well understand that Daniel is motivated by his children, having gone to incredible lengths to be with them. Yet I don't get the impression he's heartbroken about the divorce, because he doesn't hide his contempt for Miranda either.
And if you violate that, heaven forgive you.
Chris is the first of the children to discover the truth.
Dad?
And rather than realize how harmful he has been, Daniel further manipulates his children into his deception.
You can't tell Mom, okay? Because if she finds out, I'll only be able to see you through plate glass.
Miranda reveals to Mrs. Doubtfire how Daniel made her feel in their marriage.
I didn't like who I was when I was with him.
As the story progresses, Chris and Lydia both are aware of their dad, yet they continue to accept Stu.
God knows, they need some kind of stable father figure in their life right now.
And I mean, they really do. Stu is actually a nice guy who seems to care for Miranda a great deal and her children likewise. Meanwhile, at Daniel's day job, he's overcome by his childish nature and desire to control everyone. He plays his way into the goodwill of his boss, station manager Mr. Lundy.
Listen, I'd like to hear some more of your ideas.
So he just so happens to be wearing a t-shirt with dinosaurs on it, playing with dinosaurs, surrounded by pictures of dinosaurs, and he conflates them with dead singers. Strange, no? At the apartment, he's made a lovely home, perfectly acceptable to the courts for him to have shared custody of his children.
I can't get rid of Mrs. Doubtfire.
And here's the crux. He's made himself valuable as someone else, even giving value in his own life. He can't get rid of Mrs. Doubtfire.
It's It's so important to me and the children that you be there. You're part of the family now. I can't have a birthday without you.
Unironically, Bridge's restaurant is where the two will literally come face to face. But as I digress for a moment, it bugs me so much that 5-year-old Natalie is constantly being carried around by Stu. She can walk. Put her down. Anyway, it gets really weird as Daniel gets more and more drunk and downright dangerous when he purposely sabotages his rival with a known allergen.
Oh no, I killed the bastard.
Of course, Daniel is revealed as the man behind the mask, and his deception comes to light. He may be well-meaning, but he has proven to be a danger to others.
You've been able to fool a lot of people into believing that you're a 60-year-old woman.
I'm sorry, what's good? 60 years old? Forgive me, Your Honor, but how old are you?
And I refuse to further subject 3 innocent children to your peculiar and potentially harmful behavior.
Anyway, he's right, and his judgment is fair based on the evidence before him. Daniel should absolutely get some help for his obvious mental illness.
She isn't real. We have to stop referring to her as if she were a real person.
And then, through movie magic, she appears in their living room via the television. Mrs. Doubtfire isn't going anywhere but up in the world.
Hollywood.
Daniel and Miranda cannot reconcile, and that was never the goal for either of them. And rather than abide by the court order and get a psychological evaluation and only see his children supervised...
What about the courts? That legal stuff.
I took care of it.
Oh, okay. She took care of it, you guys.
But if there's love, dear, those are the ties that bind.
And they all lived happily ever after, driving off into the sunset. Okay, what is there to discern from this? Besides the obvious triggering subject matter that we can all relate to, we're here to use a biblical framework and discern the truth from the lies. This is in part a humiliation ritual for Robin Williams. As I said in the last review, they all do it. And if they want to have success in Babylon, they do it well. Aside from that, the gender-blurred lines are already consistent within the marriage and the storylines. The 80s saw a huge rise in the corporate woman being represented in media, and the fallout in the 90s meant the rise of divorced marriages and broken families needing representation. But unlike in Liar Liar, where we saw the reunification of the family, Mrs. Doubtfire shows us something else entirely. In the Bible, marriage between a man and a woman is not only Yahweh's good design, it is also a picture of the bride, the church, and the bridegroom, Jesus. The New Testament gives us a lot of good instruction on what a godly marriage looks like. Servant leadership from the husband, loving submission from the helpmate, the wife. Men and women are different. We have different roles and we do things differently. And it's not wrong, it's just different. Miranda and Daniel are different. They don't just grow apart, they start out being different. And rather than commit to one another and the vows they took, they leave the marriage that simply isn't making them happy anymore. And while I've held Daniel responsible in my mind due to his deceptive and manipulative nature, Miranda is also responsible for prioritizing her career and detaching from her spouse. Both of them are victims of the feminist narrative of the corporate working mother, taking her out of the home and away from the children, infantilizing her husband in the process. This demasculated man, whose role in the home has been replaced by his wife, now has the choice to act like one of the children or replace the mother. Daniel does both. IMDb reminds me that this movie is an adaptation of a book, so a few changes have been made, but it also tells me again and again how much liberty Robin Williams was given to improvise his lines and create his own character. Side note on the character, Mrs. Doubtfire first appeared at an Andy Kaufman show as his grandmother. Yeah, that Andy Kaufman. Anyway, because the pace and script were at the hands of a literal comedy genius / madman, several versions of the film were edited and the storyline was changed several times to suit casting. All this to say, the signs and symbols are confused and confusing, and really just seems like mainly a vehicle for the humiliation of Robin Williams.
I believe it to be a terrific performance by a very gifted actor.
But the way he owned it and presented it and seared it into our hearts and memories. He made it acceptable to be a divorced dad who loves his kids. He made the cross-dressing fun and funny because it was motivated by love for his kids. Even the corporate distant mother is now tolerable. No one loses. Everyone wins. I'll end with this. Who or what is the villain in Mrs. Doubtfire? An important element of good storytelling is a well-developed villain or antagonist. So while we witnessed a brilliant improv comedian at work, it really wasn't a well-told or complete story. So thank you so much for watching to the end. Give it a thumbs up if you liked it and a thumbs down if you didn't. Comment below which movie I should deconstruct next. Subscribe if you want to, but don't follow me. Follow the one who saves you. And until next time, keep looking up.
I can't do it. It's my turn to pull the balls at the rectory. I can't.